Back on the Patrick Netherton Show right here in 1130 The Tiger. He's Roger Santon. I'm Patrick Netherton. And since I'm wearing my Riverport Barbecue NWO barbecue shirt today, I figured it's only right we talk a little barbecue, grilling, you name it. We're gonna bring in an expert. And this is I'm really excited for this interview. I only found out about Hardcore Carnivore a few months back and kind of got into a lot of their stuff and really a lot of interesting things to find. You can go to their website, hardcorecarnivore.com, or you can follow the creator, Jess Pryles, who joins us now. You can find her at Jess Pryles on all of her social media. Jess, how are you?
Howdy and g'day.
Oh, there you go. All right, so let's start there. You're Australian by birth. You came over, 12 years ago? Is that right?
My first visit to Texas was about 12 years ago, but I immigrated about 5 years ago, but I didn't waste any time adopting the accent.
Well, sure, and that's my question. Who is more mad about your accent right now? Is it Texans who think you sound Australian, or is it your family and friends back in Australia who think you have now abandoned your accent?
I think the Australians are a little offended. It wasn't that it was on purpose. It just happened like that. But, yeah, the Australians are definitely like, why do you sound like that?
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's always the I don't want to say amusing, but when you move somewhere else, especially, it's not like you went to a place that had a pretty neutral, everyone talks about the Midwestern accent here in America. That's sort of the neutral accent. I mean, you go to deep South Texas, it's not like you're going to a neutral accent. You're going to a totally different form of an accent. So I'd imagine, was there a sort of learning curve for you with that?
A little bit. I mean, even, you mentioned Riverport Barbecue, and Stephen Joseph is a great friend of mine.
Yeah.
and has a great barbecue joint, and he has a heck of an accent,
yes.
That East Texas accent. And so everywhere I went, I guess you just pick up little bits and pieces, but including a drawl like that.
Yeah. Well, have you? I mean, when you talk to your family, do you throw y'alls in now? Is that part of your lexicon?
Yeah, I do throw y'alls in, but I reckon is also something we say in Australia. So it translated beautifully both ways.
Well, one of my favorite things to say in the world is no worries. And I know that's a very Aussie expression. And actually, I went to Australia. I went to Cairn up on the northeast coast and swam the Great Barrier Reef and did all that. I went up there in high school, and so, in college. And I feel like everyone said no worries. I'm like, I love that. It's so much better than just saying. To me, it sounds better than saying okay or no problem or whatever. So I adopted it. I say no worries everywhere I go now.
That's awesome. It does trip a few people up because I naturally say that too, and they're like, "What do you mean? I wasn't worried."
I wasn't worried. All right, so tell me about getting into meat sciences, into barbecue, into grilling, because you started this when you were back in Australia, and obviously you've come to Austin, which is one of the great homes of barbecue. Not really grilling, but much more the sort of smoked meats aspect, But walk me through the history back in Australia. How did you get interested in this, and how did you find yourself being able to have some success and have that as a career?
I always loved eating meat. I was so excited when it was lamb chop day at home. But my parents weren't the best meat cooks. They were well-done people. So I always loved it, but just never really knew how to cook it. So it was something that, like for a lot of people, I just left until I went out to either a restaurant. I would never really buy steak at home. It was kind of a restaurant thing. And then it was actually that trip to Texas that changed a lot of it for me because I got to eat barbecue for the first time. Now barbecue is extremely popular in Australia, but at the time, that whole, low and slow smoked meat thing was just not happening. It didn't exist. So I had that first taste of a Texas barbecue beef rib, and it was just amazing. And in wanting to eat more of it, that then led to wanting to learn more about it. And traveling back to Australia, the brisket in Australia looked nothing like the brisket that I was seeing in Texas, and I couldn't understand why. So you go from this layperson, didn't really buy my own meat very frequently, or just bought, prepackaged, ready cut stuff,
Mm-hmm.
to, well, why does this look different? What do you mean cattle breeds? What do you mean, it's cattle feed and butchery styles, and just fell down this rabbit hole of knowledge. And as I got to learn more about barbecue and live fire grilling, which is a huge passion of mine, at the same time, you learn about, or I chose to learn about, the raw material, which is where the meat science side of it comes in, because it's so fascinating when you can learn the actual hows and the whys of why things happen, that helps you choose how to choose the best steak. And then the natural progression of that was, of course, coming out with the things that I think are the best tasting seasonings, which is how we started Hardcore Carnivore.
You talking to Jess Pryles, who, as you mentioned, Hardcore Carnivore, you created it, hardcorecarnivore.com. So walk me through that process of, okay, number one, why did you visit Texas to start with? And then from that point, how soon was it when you realized, okay, this is maybe somewhere I would like to live?
Well, my first love was Louisiana, to be honest with you.
Well, you're welcome.
Like, I remember, this is pre-internet days, so I remember buying like a Lonely Planet guide to Louisiana and just devouring everything in the book because it sounds so romantic. And then, Texas has this great reputation worldwide of just this great, larger-than-life, everything's bigger state.
Right.
So it was just always on my to-visit list, and when I eventually did, I think maybe just because it was slightly less swampy than a lot of the parts of Louisiana,
Yes.
so the weather was a little bit better for me. And I just fell in love with Texas. And it was really, I really ended up just traveling back and forth for many years, kind of really being like spreading the gospel of meat and trying to learn more about barbecue, teach more about it in Australia. And then it was finally like, well, this is ridiculous. I'm living two separate lives. Every time I'd land in Texas, my friends here would be like, welcome home. And it was I just knew it was time to move. So I packed up my little English Staffordshire dog and we moved across an ocean. And, Texas is absolutely home for me now. I've, married a Texan and put down roots here. So I'm here to stay, America.
Well, and look, we're better for it. You mentioned the meat sciences, and to me, that's sort of fascinating. Our morning show host, in promoting this, was certainly fascinated by the idea of meat science. That there is a thing about that. Now, we've had Dr. Mark Miller, who's the head of the meat sciences department at Texas Tech. We had him on to talk about his meat judging team, and kind of that. They called him the Nick Saban of meat judging, which I thought was fascinating. So we had him on to talk a little bit about that. But I'm curious, what I notice you're in that as a student. You're going through that curriculum. Why did you decide that this is something that you needed to do more of as just a hobby and move forward to, okay, this is something I need to really learn about in an actual academic way?
So it was actually twofold for me, and it was so weird because it took me, all these decades to actually want to go to school, even though I had a degree. And so I'm actually a grad student in the meat science department at Iowa State University now. And what happened for me was two things. One, I have an amazing array of friends, similar to Mark Miller, Diana Clark, who's the meat scientist with Certified Angus Beef, and all these people who I've met in the industry because I've done a lot of inter-industry events. And I would always go to them with questions, but it really reached the stage where I just thought, I would love to understand this for myself at a deeper level instead of just, getting to ask bits and pieces. And I was really motivated to learn. And at the same time, I've picked up a lot over the years that sometimes we don't get the chance to talk about on social media because it's hard to talk about molecules and myoglobins and enzymes and make it sound cool in a photo. But I've picked up a lot over the years that I felt like, having a formal certification in it and a formal education in it would also kind of shine a spotlight on everything that I had learned so far, in addition to all this amazing knowledge that I am picking up at the same time.
How much of what you do now, because you do have the knowledge base, but how much of, and I probably know the answer to this question, but how much of what you've done and recipes and methodology, all of that stuff, how much of that is just continuing to experiment with different things, and how much of that is borrowing from other people that have had success doing things a certain way?
I would say for me personally, it's just a gradual, it's a progression of just doing things and doing things again, and then one day saying, "Oh, that worked a little differently." I don't think that there's only so many ways you can skin a cat or a deer or however you want to put it, and grilling steak is the same thing. So there are certain methods that even if you feel like you've stumbled onto it, the good chance is that someone has already done it. But what's popular kind of counts. So, for example, reverse sear is a method that's been incredibly popular in the last few years because it's a really foolproof way to cook a steak. And I've written articles about it and taught people how to do it. And then I realized, as I was filming videos, because I put a video up every week on my Facebook and IGTV and YouTube, that I wasn't actually reverse searing anymore. I'd kind of developed this habit of just getting my grill really, really hot and doing this flipping method that I call JKF, or just keep flipping, to really build a crust. So I've kind of been preaching that. Now, it's nothing new. Adam Perry Lang, who's an amazing chef, has been talking about that for a while. Heston Blumenthal promotes it, and I would hazard to guess that possibly the first caveman that built a fire and put some meat over it was very possibly using the same method.
Sure.
But, when we get so entrenched in whatever's so hot right now, we sometimes forget about other methods that we should be looking at too. So I love just naturally evolving in the kitchen, I guess.
All right, so the JKF is kind of the thing you're pushing right now, and I did that. I used to always do that with my steaks growing up when I'd cook them, is I just kept flipping until they were done. I didn't know that we were supposed to only flip it once. I didn't know that was a thing until much later. But I'm curious because now you come out with that. You've got rubs, you've got videos. How much pushback do you get from people? Because I watch my friends that are pit masters, Brian Bingham up in Longview and Stephen Joseph and all these folks up here who are getting feedback and are getting really pushback from people that think they know better. Because we all can put a piece of meat on a grill and think we're an expert. How much pushback do you get from people saying, "Oh, well, that's completely dumb. That's not the way you do it at all"?
I think that Brian and Steven are in a little bit tougher position because they have that customer service aspect of having customers. Generally for me, I'm really lucky. If you're following me on social media, chances are you're more interested to learn than to tell me I'm doing something wrong. But
Sure.
Of course it still happens, and everyone has an opinion. And I guess the most interesting part, I think, for me is that it's not just what you think is the right thing to do, but that your taste is subjective as well.
Sure.
So, there are folks that like their steak well done, and someone who prefers medium rare is never going to understand what that well done person is thinking, and vice versa. So they're always going to have different opinions on the best way to do something. In those cases, I kind of say, you do you. That's how you prefer it, and that's how you think it produces the best steak for your taste buds. Go for it. That's cool, but I still believe in what I'm talking about.
Well, I will tell you this, Jess. My producer and lifelong good buddy, Rogers Hampton, is a well-done, burn it, and then when you think you've burned it, put it on for a little longer type of guy. And you're right. I do not understand what he's doing. And then I said, so after you cook this thing into basically beef jerky, then you ask for a whole bunch of A1 to soften it back up. I was like, I don't understand that. This concept is completely foreign to me, but he wants it burnt. That's the only way he wants to eat it. And so, I don't know. I feel your pain on that one. I deal with this on a daily basis. I really, it's just,
yeah. There's no accounting for taste in some people,
or lack of taste, as the case may be for my boy Rogers. Hey, another thing I think that's probably got to be interesting, and maybe you've dealt with it, maybe you haven't, is being a woman in this industry. Because typically, steak and barbecue and the grill and, that's a man's territory. I'm going to be out there flipping those steaks, that kind of thing. You come in here, you obviously have the knowledge base, you know what you're talking about. Do you get much pushback because you're a woman, or have you in the past And has that changed in some way as you've grown?
I haven't really, and it's been pretty extraordinary. I mean, I'm sure there's been the outlying person that just dismisses that it's not a woman's place. And for me, it's just more like there's just sometimes people just assume that it's the man's place, and it's nice to be able to show them that it's anybody's place. But for me, I make the biggest deal of saying it's not about men or women. It's really about who's just the better cook. Like if you want to listen to what I have to say, it's because I've, like you said, put the work in, and I've got the experience, and I've earned my place to tell you all of this experience that I have. So whether, if I was a guy or if I was a girl, like, just listen to the people who have the best stories and the best, the best people to learn from, I guess is what I would say to that. But yeah, on the whole, it's been super. I've never had any major incidents, and it's been really nice.
That is good. And one of the things that I found I'm a barbecue connoisseur. I can't cook it to save my life. I don't have that kind of patience to wait for 14, 15, 16 hours on a piece of brisket. But I love to eat it. I'm a certified judge in it. I mean, all of that stuff. And so getting to know a lot of these pitmasters in Texas, it's fascinating because they are some of the most open and honest people you'll find. You walk in there, and almost to anyone that walks in and asks, they'll tell you exactly what they're doing every single time. And I find that fascinating, the openness that people have, especially in the barbecue realm.
There's this thing that people say, barbecue family. They support each other. They trade recipes. They trade information. There's secret little Facebook groups for people in the industry to offer each other that kind of support. It's incredible to see what should be direct competition really embrace a community spirit.
It is pretty remarkable. Talking to Jess Pryles from hardcorecarnivore.com. Again, check it out at hardcorecarnivore.com, or you can find her on social media at Jess Pryles, JessPryles. All right, so is there a most common either misperception or mistake that the amateur griller or someone who wants to barbecue does? Is there something you see over and over and over again that you have to correct? Or do people seem to have a pretty decent handle on things?
I think that the mistakes that are made are pretty common when folks are starting out. And it's that same thing. If you can tell someone that you think they're making a mistake, they might think that they're cooking the best steaks of their life. So it's subjective. But the main things that I see are, especially when it comes to charcoal grilling, that people aren't using enough fuel, that they're really conservative with the charcoal, and then they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. Because if you don't have enough heat, like not having your pan hot enough, not having your grill hot enough, that's why you're not getting a sear. That's why all the water is running out of your steak and you're getting that gray appearance instead of that lovely, crusty, seared finish. So don't skimp on charcoal. It's cheaper than meat. Definitely get your grill hot enough, get your pan hot enough. For a lot of people, that means setting smoke detectors off. But I feel like most people in Louisiana have an outdoor cooking setup, at least like a crawfish boil setup. So put your pan on that and smoke outdoors. It'll be perfect. And I guess when it comes to barbecue, honestly, the best advice is you just have to keep at it. I feel like now that there's so much information and so many resources available, from YouTube videos to blogs to whatever, a lot of people are reading too much and nearly overloading on different opinions and different information before they've even started. So they buy their first brisket and they inject it within an inch of its life, and they worry about water pans, and they worry about pellet flavors, and they worry about all this stuff when they're never going to know what went wrong with the cook because they already introduced too many variables. The best way to learn anything is just to practice it, and that goes the same for grilling or barbecue too. All
right, so what's next? What do you need to conquer next? I mentioned you have a burgeoning meat empire going on, Hardcore Carnivore. You've got 100,000 plus followers, and you've built up the following. What's the next thing that you're looking for?
I mean, well, I'm in school right now, so that's taking up a little bit of time, and there are exams, which is really unusual as an adult to deal with that.
Sure.
But that's, getting this graduate stuff under my belt is a big part of it, and then continuing to just grow the Hardcore Carnivore line. So we do have the seasonings. That's our best seller, and that's the thing that started it for me. But we also try and add really thoughtful items like, barbecue peach paper, or we've got a logbook for pit masters that's printed on actual stone paper. So it's blood-proof and sweat-proof and all the things it needs to be proof to be barbecue appropriate. So I love adding like really useful tools to the line as well, things that I would use, things that I think are going to help future meat cooks. And I've always got about 90 million projects in the air, and at the same time, recipe testing every week and sharing that love online. And I feel like if I slow down, something's wrong. So we're just going to keep going full speed.
What's your favorite non-meat?
My favorite non-meat?
Yeah. What is your favorite? What's your favorite food if you're not eating a protein, you're not grilling something? What are you going and eating?
Oh, my goodness. This is tough. I feel like it's definitely a carb. It's got to be a carb.
Sure.
Any kind of carb. Potatoes, noodles, pasta, whatever. But yeah, I do eat meat 7 days a week. So it's not like I'm trying to do it to prove a point. I eat a combination of lean and richer proteins. And so I don't know. I guess I've never thought about that because I'm a real carnivore.
No, and good for you. Look, I'm in the same boat with you. Is there a particular food, and this usually goes back to a lot of childhood. Is there a particular food that you would be somewhat embarrassed that people would know you like? I tell people I still like the McRib from McDonald's. Like, I have no reason to like the McRib. It's not barbecue. It's not all that good. But I've loved it since childhood, and when the McRib is back, I get all fired up and go get two of them. Is there something like that in your world that maybe you grew up with, or something that you still love, and you kind of go, man, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit I like this?
Oh, 100%. It's a meal that we got served at kindergarten that then my mom would make every Sunday night. Was like I'm not cooking a big meal, or sometimes we get takeout or pizza night, in our house. And this was a really easy thing for her to make, and she would make it every now and then. So it's the height of comfort food for me. And it's tuna mornay over rice. So you make a French roux with butter and flour. You add in canned tuna, and you put it over white rice. And it is like, it's so gross to so many people, but it's like, it's just total comfort food for me.
The thing I love about
Weird,
that
right?
is everyone has something they enjoy. I grew up on barbecue around here, and I wouldn't eat it you couldn't pay me enough to eat it now. But that's what I grew up on. That was what I enjoyed. I just like the idea that the I don't want to cook night involves making a roux, of all things. Like, that's not exact. That's not, it's not like throwing Kraft mac and cheese in a microwave or something. I mean, come on.
I do have to say, a French roux takes about 5 to 10 minutes. It's not like a Cajun roux where you're investing a good hour in a glass of wine. So there is a slight difference, but still, yes, it was. Maybe I did get some latent sort of cooking messages or lessons from my mom.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, look, check her out at hardcorecarnivore.com. There's all of the seasonings are in there, all the apparel's in there. I need a Beef Chief hat, by the way. That's fantastic. That was my nickname in high school.
We can do that.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. All kind of good stuff. The Just Keep Flipping method she goes into on Instagram. Again, follow her on all the social medias at Jess Pryles. Jess, this has been fantastic. I really do appreciate your time. And look, let's reconnect sometime not before too long and talk some more.
Sounds awesome. Thank y'all so much for having me.
You're quite welcome. Look, she said y'all. Did you hear that? I heard her drop the y'all in there. Very well done, Jess. Well done.
You bet.
All right. It's Jess Pryles from hardcorecarnivore.com.